Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is the 12th meeting of the Civic Works Committee. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings, and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact cwc@london.ca. To begin, I will look to committee to see if there's any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Okay, seeing none, I will just confirm that we do have quorum and Mayor Holder is on other business and will not be joining us for this committee today. And we do have Councillor Van Holst joining us as a guest as well, so welcome. We have 4 items for the consent agenda. There has been nothing on an added agenda, so the original one is the correct one to be following today. So there's items 2.1 through to 2.4. Looking to committees, see if you would like any of them pulled and dealt with separate. Councillor Van Merbergen.
Thank you, Chair. If we could pull 2.3 on sewage overflows.
Certainly. So the remaining 2.1, 2.2, and 2.4, I would need a mover and a seconder to deal with those as one for consent. Moved by Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Van Merbergen, and looking to committee for questions or comments on items 2.1, 2.2, and 2.4. Begin my speakers list with Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A few questions and comments. Number one, with the Kensington Bridge EA. Now, this was going to be a part of the west leg route of BRT. Would that have been covered under the project funding for BRT, the works that are being proposed here, or is this would this have been property tax based, levy based?
Mr. McCrae, would you have an answer for this one?
Through the chair, thank you for your interest in the project. If I remember correctly, I'd have to review the exact routing of BRT. I know it was also focused on the Queens Avenue Bridge, where other projects overlap. Then there are synergies with respect to rehabilitation of infrastructure, but the external funding programs typically limit their eligibility of costs to the growth expansion components as opposed to the asset management renewal parts of the project.
Councillor Turner, a follow-up or anything additional?
On that, I'll keep moving. With respect to the municipal waste collection, Mr. Stanford and I had a chance to chat a little bit earlier. But as I was reading this report, the question that just jumped out at me was if we've now created a stream for recycling the toilets, why are we still collecting them on the curbside? And would this not instead be a better opportunity for us to just cease that practice? These are heavy, bulky items, take up quite a bit of space in our landfill, and these are things that we don't want in landfill if we have the opportunity to recycle. So perhaps I think the committee would benefit from the response that Mr. Stanford was able to give me. So if I might, through you, Madam Chair, pose the question to Mr. Stanford.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Councillor Turner. It sounds like you and I had similar conversations with Mr. Stanford. So for the public and committee, could you please respond to Councillor Turner's question? Mr. Stanford.
Thank you, and through the chair. Our report has 2 main items. The first one is a health and safety item, and that is to make sure that toilets are being better managed at the curb for the safety of not only our sanitation operators, but also for the people who place the items at the curb. And that is why we're introducing the concept of the toilet will be placed back in the box that typically toilets come from when they're purchased at a store. We're also introducing, and this is part of the 60% waste diversion action plan, we had targeted toilets and other ceramics as an item that we would move into from a recycling perspective. In that particular report, we'd indicated that it would be phased in over a 2-step process. First, a program to make people aware at the curb that toilets need to be handled properly, and that we would eventually move them to a situation, if approved by committee and council, to banning them at the curb, meaning they could no longer be placed at the curb. So this particular report highlights that we're going to move, staff wish to move in the direction of first, the health and safety change at the curb. And then part of that education awareness program would include the opportunity that should you be able to get that toilet to the drop-off depot, there will be bins set up to receive that item along with some other ceramics, such as the ceramic sink. We've proposed the two-step process to basically work with Londoners to allow them to adapt to the change and to recognize that some people just do not have the opportunity to get an item from their home to the drop-off depot. This approach of providing a phased-in situation would see that we would come back to committee and council spring of next year, when we have about 6 months worth of information and have heard from Londoners basically on their experience of either going to the drop-off depot or, of course, dealing with them curbside. And we would, at that point in time, come back with our recommendation on the next step, which would most likely be a banning of this particular material should we be able to market the material. That is very key. That would be a crushed aggregate material. And at the same time, my final comment would be, we would also at that point determine whether there'd be other items that might be worthy of consideration from a ban perspective, knowing that the drop-off depot program would represent the opportunity for these materials to be dropped off. And if I may, through the chair, one last item on this. At the same time, we must also look at the flow of traffic into our drop-off depots. They are very busy locations, especially during some seasons, such as the fall leaf collection, where additional visitors can be problematic. So we need to look at our depot operation to make sure that we can accommodate some additional visitors in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for that reply. Councillor Turner, a follow-up to that?
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Stanford, for that response. Having read the report and prior to having the chance to discuss this, I was in the mood to move that we just discontinue collection of toilets from the curbside since a viable alternative and recycling program were in place. But the answer made sense. But I will be looking in June for us to be moving towards removing these from the curbside collection stream. I think we're creating. If you've got a recycling option and a curbside disposal option, a landfill option, then and the landfill option is more convenient than the recycling option, I worry that in most cases people are going to choose the more convenient option rather than the recycling and the better option for us. But that was a thorough response, and I'm satisfied at this time to await the response in June and see where we can go from here. With your indulgence, Madam Chair, just one last question on item 2.4, and that's with respect to the West London Dyke Norman Bradford Bridge concrete repairs. Recognizing this is an over expense from the planned expense, and I see the source of financing report. I find it a little. I recognize that the concrete condition may pose a hazard to the Thames Valley Parkway underneath it, but it seems to be a strange place to grab funding to be able to support those repairs rather than our regular capital funding for roadways. Perhaps a bit of an exploration through you to staff about why we would choose that. Is it just a convenient and we could justify it through those channels, or is it really an appropriate source of funding?
Thank you for that question. And Mr. Mathers.
Through the chair, as you probably noted by looking through the source of financing, it really has been broken up over a variety of accounts. So we have tried to allocate those costs as we felt appropriate. You'll see that there is a component that does come from the major bridge upgrades, but also a piece that kind of acknowledges that there's some changes to the design of the bridge to accommodate the pathway. So we have taken the steps to try to allocate those as appropriately as possible. So we feel that what has brought forward to you is appropriate. Thanks.
Councillor Turner, a follow-up on that one?
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Mr. Mathers. My concern ultimately is that in doing so, we may end up shorting a fund that that promotes active transportation, and we may, I guess, by opportunity cost, miss out on some opportunities to be able to further enhance the TVP or components of it, rather than going towards the road construction components and the bridge construction. But recognizing that there may not be a lot of options. I can appreciate the response. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further hands up from committee members, I will welcome guest Councillor Van Holst, and please proceed with your question.
Madam Chair, thank you. And through you, regarding the toilets, just let me confirm that if we go with the ban, the residents would take it to the Enviro Depot, and then those would be put into a bin of some sort to later on be ground up into aggregate. There's no way for us to have that happen somehow from the curb.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Stanford.
Through the chair, and thank you for the question. That will be part of our analysis. When we start looking at having many people driving to our drop-off depots, and if those are single-purpose trips, i.e. dropping off a toilet, we are somewhat defeating the purpose. We really want trips to be multi-purpose. So this is going to be part of our analysis. The other thing is curbside collection potential. The things we do have to look at would be, could certain materials be mixed together into a single vehicle and then separated at a central facility? So these are a few of the items that we still need to look at, but we wanted to do that in a step, and that step when we report back will include a look at those particular options before committee and council makes a final decision.
Councillor Van Holst.
Okay, thank you very much. So what I see happening is that a single vehicle is going to take a toilet from their home to and drop it off to the Enviro Depot and come back. I appreciate your concern about that. Is there a possibility of having this be an item where people could just call and the city picks it up? Is that, it seems to me there would be a similar amount of travel, but it would be providing a pretty good service and still achieve the objective. So perhaps that's something to consider, or maybe it has been considered, but I'll throw that out there, as they say. And Mr. Stanford, Madam Chair, he can comment, or maybe that could be part of the report that comes back.
Mr. Stanford, just wanted to clarify if you considered a call-in service for city curbside pickup of toilets and porcelain materials.
Thank you, and through the chair, that will definitely be an item we are looking at, because certain other materials such as furniture, such as couches, such as mattresses, all fall into a very similar category. How do we efficiently get them off of the curb with the least inconvenience to our residents, but at the same time looking at those travel trips and greenhouse gas? So that will all be part of our report back.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Van Holst. You've been satisfied for now?
Yes, and my thanks. I think that could be great assistance to the residents. I know that many have difficulty getting things to the Enviro Depot, and elderly people have a challenge. I myself wanted to get rid of a couch and thought maybe if I pull this thing apart, it can be easier to move. And that process was nightmarish. And so I think there's opportunity here for us to provide some good service, and I'm thrilled that we're also going to be able to help the environment in some of these new initiatives. So thank you.
Thank you for that. At one point I saw Councillor Van Merbergen's hand. Perfect. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. I pulled 2.3 in error. I simply have a question, so I'll leave it in your hands if you want to vote on that separately, or just have it as part of the consent package.
We'll do it separate at this point. Okay, so seeing no further hands up, we can call the question on items 2.1, 2.2, and 2.4. And the vote is now opening in eScribe.
Madam Chair, I haven't put e-scribe on this computer. My apologies. I just realized. I'll vote in the affirmative.
Okay, perfect. The clerk has heard that.
I have the same issue, so I can vote by hand if you wish, or,
Can you do a verbal vote, please?
yeah, that's,
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you for that. Item 2.3, the sewage overflows and bypasses into the Thames River sanitary cross connections. This one is for Mr. Mathers. So Councillor Van Meerbergen, if you want to pose your question, and then staff can answer.
oh, thank you, Chair. I believe I read, at least to the administration's knowledge, there's maybe 37 properties that are inappropriately attached with sanitary cross connections. That seems low. Is it possible that we will find many more of these? And if so, do we have an educated estimate as to what or how many are still out there?
To Mr. Mathers?
Through the chair, many of the ones that we do find are historical in nature, so they're from older areas of the city. It's not unheard of to see it in a new development, but with the newer building codes and inspection practices, it's much less likely. For the most part, we find these when we have a complaint that's been finding like toilet paper or materials at a storm outfall. So with the newer types of stormwater management and having stormwater ponds, it's fairly easily to see those types of things happen, and rather than having them to escape into the natural water courses. So it's not as common an issue nowadays, but every year we do find one or two, and it's really just through people in the public like notifying us or from our crews doing work and finding it in those cases.
Okay, Councillor Van Meerbergen, follow up.
So we're not in a situation where there could be thousands of homes or properties that may have these connections.
Mr. Mathers?
Through the chair, I would say definitively not. We would that would be fairly easy for us to be able to see if it was that high number. The one of the problems of why it's so difficult is because it's a very small number of homes, and on the order of what we found, and possibly finding one or two a year.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll recognize Councillor Cassidy next, and then Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On this same issue, this is concerning. I'm glad that staff have brought this report to us. It's just one more along the same vein. We have had reports about the orphaned areas in the city that were annexed and yet not connected to city services and still remain unconnected to city services, and so they are on septic systems. So it's in the same theme as that these are things that need to be rectified in order to, and as well the homes where their property drains into the sanitary system. All of these things are connected, and they are compromising the health of the Thames River at the end of the day, and the whole water system. So I had that question of whether they were newer homes. I suspected they would be older, and so I'm wondering if for the ones where we need the homeowner's permission to gain access to the home, I wonder if there is a possibility to do something upon the sale of the home. So apply some sort of a lien or something, so that before the home can be transferred to a new owner, that the city could go in and conduct this kind of inspection. Is there any kind of like, I understand when we have outstanding site plan issues on properties, that we have that kind of power in place to ensure that the site plan is adhered to before the property changes owners. So I wonder if staff could comment on that through you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for the question. Mr. Mathers, are you the one for this one as well?
Yep, absolutely. Through the chair, we at this time we don't have that power. One of the biggest challenges we have is that the issue is happening on private property, and we don't have that ability to access the private property unless somebody allows us to do that. What we are doing is, as noted in the report, is we've reached out to the Ministry of Environment and Conservation and Parks, and we'll be meeting with them to see if they have any suggestions for ways that we can try to enforce this. The province is the authority that actually gives people the opportunity to be able to discharge waste. So our hope is to maybe work with them, see if they have any other suggestions for us, and also even see if there's funding opportunities for this type of work. But at this time, we don't have the ability to like put a lien on their home. One of the reasons why I brought this report forward is that we've sent letters just recently, and we just wanted to ensure that council was informed in case they get questions from constituents. So we are actively moving on this, and we really do want to try to work cooperatively with people and try to get those folks that are going to work with us cooperatively, and then come up with some strategies later on if we can't get everyone to try to assist us in rectifying these problems.
Okay, Councillor Cassidy, a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So the 300,000 that's in the report, that applies to the 17 that have been identified as complete cross connections, and so we can rectify that on without going on to the homeowner's property. Is that correct? That's what that 300,000 applies to?
Mr. Mathers?
Through the chair, that's correct. We've found through researching what other municipalities are doing that this is not uncommon for the municipality to actually do some work at their own cost if it can be rectified easily. In this case, we can do this work if it's something that's completely within that right of way, and we can take one pipe and basically swap them so that they're going in the right direction. Not all homes have that opportunity to be able to make that change, but we're suggesting at this time that we're going to be more active and actually use some city funding to be able to rectify these problems if we can in those instances.
Okay, anything final, Councillor Cassidy?
Yes, I have more. So the work that would be required inside a home, how does that compare expense-wise? Is it more expensive to do those partial cross connections, or on par with the exterior work?
Staff?
Through the chair, for the most part, it's more expensive. So what we find in some of the homes, so in an ideal home, you have all of your sewage from every fixture, whether it's a toilet or a sink or a tub, it all goes to one pipe and then goes to the correct place to the treatment plant. In some homes, different fixtures are going to different pipes. So you might have a shower going to the storm pipe where it's not supposed to be going, a toilet that's going in the right direction. So what it would take for in these instances, you'd actually have to look at the plumbing within the building. It may even require you to rip up the basement floor to be able to figure out exactly which pipe is going where, and then to correct that issue. So that's the challenge when we start getting to these more complicated cases where you actually have to get into someone's home and do some excavation work. So that's one that would for the most part be more costly.
Okay. So one final comment, Madam Chair, I like this approach. Obviously, we should go after the homes where we can do it without disrupting the homeowner and without requiring permission. So I'm supportive of the staff approach there. I also have like one quick question, and then I'm done. And it goes back to the overflows that are caused by the property drainage going into the sanitary system rather than the stormwater system. And I wonder if staff would have considered also identifying those for the Ministry of the Environment, since it is a similar problem and does in turn contribute to these overflows going into the Thames River. And again, we have difficulty getting buy-in from homeowners to participate in those projects to separate their drainage from the sanitary system. I think we need to move forward. And in some of these cases, these weren't the homeowners. It wasn't the fault of the homeowners. They didn't do this. They built a house, and a simple home inspection wouldn't identify these kinds of things. So just wondering if staff considers a similar approach for those other issues.
Okay. Mr. Mathers?
Through the chair, those are some really great points, and we're actually going to be bringing a forward report in one of the November CWC meetings, actually going to cover that exact topic. So we brought forward a report earlier this year that was talked about one of our new initiatives to take a look at where the unwanted water was going. So we're actually been doing a lot of work on that in the last few months, and we're going to be bringing forward a report that's going to discuss that very issue in November.
Thank you. I'll recognize Councillor Turner, followed by Councillor Van Holst.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks to my colleagues for their questions and to Mr. Mathers for his responses here. Given the number, it's small. By comparison, the number of stormwater inputs into the sanitary system is significantly higher. But the impacts end up being the same to some degree, actually. The stormwater inputs into the sanitary system create this conditions for overflow. The sanitary inputs into the stormwater system is just an overflow, like automatically. It's just untreated effluent going straight into our water courses. So this one's a little bit more concerning because it's more immediate and more impactful, because you don't necessarily have the benefit, so to speak, use that loosely, of diluting as you do with wet water event overflows at our sanitary treatment plants. In the report, it talks about some of the things that had contemplated but never actually actuated. One of the bullets is none of the municipalities contacted have gone to the extreme of conducting a dye test under a search warrant through provisions of the Provincial Offences Act. I'd imagine there's a couple things that have occurred here. One's the Provincial Offences Act. I'd imagine that any sanitary connection to a stormwater system is a building code violation. What are the remedies to actually enforce where we come to know of these cross connections? Do we have the ability, or is I think Mr. Mathers was talking with the ministry, MECP, to be able to do the enforcement arm. But it sounds like we probably have the authority and auspices to be able to enforce them on our own. Do we not?
Mr. Mathers?
Through the chair, one of the significant challenges is having direct evidence that it is coming from a specific home. So unless you have a camera that's looking in the sewer and seeing something coming out of the pipe, we can't say 100% for certain that it comes from that pipe, from that home, until we can get into the home and then do some dye tests. So we'll actually go to the different fixtures, put down some coloring dye, go into the sewer and see which sewer it ends up in. So in substantial number of the cases, if we can't get into the home, we can't say for certain that's actually that they have a cross connection, but we see the evidence at the other side. So that's one of our big challenges. We can't say definitively whether that's an issue, but we will work with the MECP to see if there's any other way that we could be able to pursue this a little bit more directly. So I think it's a very valid comment from the councillor.
Councillor Turner?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mathers. In the report, it also states that 23 of the 37 are confirmed. And 17 of those confirmed locations are considered complete. So how did you talked about the evidence? It sounds like if they've been confirmed, that we actually know, and that we have enough to be able to say, homeowner, I got to get this fixed, or is confirmed mean something a little different in this context?
Okay, Mr. Mathers?
Through the chair, no, absolutely right. The confirmed ones, we can say that they've come in from those homes. So those are the ones that we're looking to start by working with the homeowner to try to rectify it on their own side, and also try to progress with doing some city work within the right of way. The 17 value that we provide in the report is actually just an estimate, because it will take us being actually going out into the field and determining the actual locations of some of these pipes to make sure that we can do the work. So that's where that value comes from. But we through the newest set of letters that we've sent out, we're hoping to re-engage people, try to get them to come along willingly. And if they're not, then we're going to look at other remedies if they're not willing to be able to participate with this. And I think looking at some more of the more extreme remedies would be very much appropriate if we can't get them to work with us in the short term.
Councillor Turner.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you. That's helpful. Further to Councillor Cassidy's point, in most circumstances, this is not through a knowledgeable action on the part of the homeowner. This is something that they may not have known and come to knowledge of, and are a little worried about what the cost might be. So the grant program is helpful in that circumstance. But I appreciate the approach of taking this progressively. I think it's important to inform the homeowners to try and get their compliance willfully. But at the end of the day, the situations do need to be corrected, and if there's continued resistance, I think it's important that we consider and exercise the enforcement pathway if that's the way we need to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Van Hulst, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you, my first question is, of the 37, how many did you think that could be dealt with at the right of way?
Mr. Mathers.
Through the chair. So currently we're suggesting approximately 17. That's just what we've been using for estimation purposes, but it will take us actually looking at each one independently, but we're suggesting approximately 17.
Councillor Van Hulst.
Thank you. And how large are the two commercial properties that were identified?
Mr. Mathers.
The two commercial properties, they are larger, but the impact was less from those properties. I won't get into all the specifics, but it wasn't related to specifically toilets. So as much as they are an impact, we are proceeding and working with them. But the severity of the overflows weren't as substantial in those cases.
Councillor Van Hulst, anything further?
No, just perhaps one comment about extreme measures. So those are the things that I'm very reluctant to take. Certainly warrants and things like that. I'd prefer we simply offer to buy the home and fix it if that's the case, rather than take other extreme measures as I could imagine them. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments and for joining us. I see no further hands up for questions or comments from committee members. I will now look for a mover and a seconder of item 2.3, moved by Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Van Meerbergen. And I'll call the question.
I vote yes.
I vote yes as well.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
For that, we have no scheduled items before us today, nor items for direction. Would anyone like anything discussed on the deferred matters list? Okay, Councillor Turner, were you moving it or did you have a question about it?
A question about it. There's a couple items in there that identify either third quarter 2021 or September 2021 for report out dates. This is our last meeting in September, so I don't know if those dates need to be modified.
Okay, are you happy if we bring back clarification for that at the next round of the Civic Works, that those items will be all updated, or do you want a verbal update from staff now?
I don't need the update. I just a sense if they're on the radar of staff, because the report, the deferred matters report, isn't being reached, I guess, in terms of what the objectives are.
Yeah, is there any staff with us today who would like to comment on the items that are behind schedule, or just anything else further for Councillor Turner?
If I may, through the chair, it's Jay Stanford here. The items that I have on this will be updated for the next meeting, and happy to offer any explanations at that time. Some of them are just going to be delayed one cycle. Some of them will actually be pushed into the first quarter of 2022.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. Councillor Turner, are you satisfied with that answer?
I am. I just make a note of that as we move the motion here.
Absolutely perfect for that. And thank you for moving the deferred matters list. Looking for a seconder for the deferred matters list. Seconded by Councillor Cassidy. Calling the question.
I'll vote yes.
I vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Perfect. That brings us to adjournment. I would need a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Turner, and a hand vote is adequate. All those in favor of parting ways?
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful week.